Hello and welcome to Innovation Lab, your go-to resource for all things biotech startups. Brought to you by the National Cancer Institute's Small Business Innovation Research, SBIR Development Center. Our podcast hosts interviews with successful entrepreneurs and provides resources for small businesses looking to take their cutting-edge cancer solutions from lab to market. I'm Billy Bozza, a program director at NCI SBIR, and today's host. In the previous two episodes on writing a strong commercialization plan, 5 NCI SBIR-funded companies provided insights for putting together this critical Phase 2 SBIR or STTR application component. To conclude this series, we are bringing the speakers together for a panel discussion to answer questions from aspiring applicants.
And I have a couple of questions to get us going if things are going slow. One's come in already from Thomas Taylor. So when preparing an SBIR fast track application, they may require Phase 2B to complete larger studies for FDA 510K review. How much detail should be included in the Phase 2 fast track commercialization plan? And then I guess maybe we can lump it in together, a general question on what type of regulatory pathway and information should be included in a commercialization plan. Maybe Carla, since they're talking about devices and 510K, maybe you can provide some guidance on that.
Of course, yeah. So, I mean, the information that we included on the regulatory section of the commercialization plan included first, our category or class for the FDA. So previously to submitting, we have submitted what is called, previously to submitting our SBIR application, we have submitted what is called a 513J request for classification. So that's a formal mechanism by which you can request a classification from the FDA for your device. So we were classified as a class 2 de novo, so we included that information in the SBIR proposal. We included the team, in particular, that we have been working with for regulatory affairs, particularly our regulatory consultant. That's a good way to reassure the reviewers that you have the right expertise to tackle your regulatory pathway. And then we included a lot of details about we had completed an FDA pre-submission. So that's when you meet with the FDA to design the clinical trial and discuss the evidence that they would like to see to get approval for our device. So in our proposal, we were suggesting to cover the clinical trials that would support FDA approval, and we made sure to point out that we had already discussed the design of that trial with the FDA and that we had a clear picture of, sample size, indication for use, and the endpoints that we needed to meet in order to be successful. So those were the main areas that we covered on that section.
Great, thanks, Carlos. And so Thomas clarified that he was referring to a Bridge Award application. So just to put everything in perspective, all Phase 2 applications, directed Phase 2, fast track, grants, contracts, they all require a commercialization plan as well as a Bridge Award application. And the way you organize it and the information that you include is all the same. It's all the different areas that Sarah mentioned. It'll just really kind of depend on stage of development. Likely if you're submitting a Bridge Award application, you're a little later in development. So some of those things might shift a little bit further down the pipeline. Okay, so now we have a question on reimbursement. So maybe someone can speak a little on type of reimbursement information they included, and if there's any good resources to learn more, about how to understand more about reimbursement and things that payers might cover. And specifically, again, this is kind of focused towards medical devices, but I think this is a good question for anyone to jump in on.
I can comment on that. Happy to hear what the other panelists have to say as well. But on the reimbursement section, we have been working with a reimbursement consultant. So similarly to the regulatory section, we included that information there, again, to make sure to point out that we had good expertise in the team to tackle that issue. We had conducted some preliminary analysis of potential existing CPT codes that we could be accessing. So that's also some information we added there. So made sure that to identify codes or mechanisms that your device could or your drug could access to once you get FDA approval. We talk a little bit about the pricing as well that would be covered by those codes, and how that make sense with also our business plan and the financial projections for sales. That was some of the information we included. In terms of good resources to find about this, we did a lot of digging in terms of comparable devices, not necessarily competitors, but we are a home monitoring device, so we look at other home monitoring devices like Holter monitors for cardiac applications, or glucose monitors for diabetes, so completely different from the oncology space, but still a lot of parallelisms. And we kind of learned a lot from them in terms of what were the reimbursement mechanisms that were being used to pay for those products that are already in the market, and how we could potentially apply for similar pathways. So that's how we approach it.
Thanks, Carlos.
I could also speak to, so for us, there was a couple of different sort of revenue streams for us. One was we were targeting providers who were participating in CMS's oncology care model. And so they got what were called MEOS payments. So they would use those MEOS payments to buy software such as ours so that they could meet the required activities such as care plans and remote monitoring and survivorship. And then more recently, chronic care management, principal care management, and new navigation codes were relevant to the work, the services that we enabled.
Great, excellent. Two, there's a couple of resources that our office has highlighted, and that's in the slides that y'all will receive. So there's something called an early payer feedback program. That's where you can work together with payers and CDRH and FDA and kind of get some feedback at the time you would actually submit a Q-sub. There's also through our seed office, we have entrepreneurs in residence, EIRs, and there's actually a link that's provided in the slide where you can get knowledge guide informations on these different kind of reimbursement considerations. That's a really good resource for kind of getting some initial information. And if you're actually an NIH SBIR awardee, you can request consults in this space. And through that same link, you'll be able to request a consult where you'll be paired up with one of those entrepreneurs in residence, and you can ask some of those questions too to gain some more understanding. Okay.
If I may, I will add maybe a note on the reimbursement, because I just remember that another thing we added is that we had conducted a lot of customer interviews, and we actually identified some customers, particularly in the accountable care space, for some capitated organizations that were actually willing to do commercial pilots with our technology without requiring a reimbursement code initially. So we thought that was a great opportunity to get some initial traction, or to get a beachhead customer, so that we could actually develop the evidence that the insurers want to see while doing commercial programs already. So some examples of these organizations are what is called integrated delivery networks, like Kaiser Permanente in California, or the Veteran Health Association. So we got some letters of intent as a consequence of our customer discovery that we attached to the application, and I think that was some additional information we included in that segment.
I had one more thing to add too, is that for us it wasn't just about revenue enhancements, but also enabling efficiencies within provider organizations. So the computerized symptom pathways, as an example, which was the SBIR grant, enabled efficiencies with nursing triage that impacted operating costs. So that's another opportunity as well.
Perfect. At this time, I'd like to let Beatrice say hello and introduce herself. She's our last panel speaker.
I'm Beatrice Langton Webster. I'm CEO of Cancer Targeted Technology, and we're a small biotech that basically is developing small molecule targeted drugs for prostate cancer. And we've been in the radiodiagnostic and radiotherapeutic space, and now also in the chemotherapeutic space. So a long-standing relationship with SBIR, and I've been with the company about 15 years now. Thanks, Billy.
Thanks, B. Another question came in. I think this is a programmatic one. I'll do a quick answer here. So it's a question on commercialization plan information for an SBIR STTR phase 1. So that's not required for a phase 1 application. But just to be clear, right, there should still be, an ability to generate a commercial product. So you can really carve out a paragraph in the research strategy section to kind of indicate this. You want it to be clear that there's a need for a product to be developed. The potential market exists. And also if there's any barriers to market entry, you can kind of highlight those and how you would kind of handle and address that. Yeah, this is a good question. I think almost all the speakers can provide a different aspect of this here. So, how does SBIR funding fit into going out and raising funds from either institutional investors or angel investors or strategic partners? Can you speak to potential orders or how it's kind of worked in your history and experience? And maybe Sid, you can kick us off first on that one, maybe.
Sure. This is just my experience, and and my experience may not be universal, right? Our company is a diagnostic company, and when we talk to investors, there's a couple of value points from SBIRs. One is it's a credibility on the data that you generate, and also it allows you to buy time because when you build a diagnostic or a device product, it actually takes a long time to build the product and get paid because you have to solve the reimbursement problem, you have to solve the regulatory problem, and for diagnostics, solving regulatory does not mean you get reimbursed. So it's like independent problems you have to solve. So I think it's really a matter of data credibility and time that you buy. But
you mentioned you raised some funds as well, and of course you've received SBIR awards. So in your case, what came first? What was the chicken? What was the egg?
SBIRs came first because our path was like a 3-step business model. The first step is to focus on the research market because we have a technology that enables a diagnostics, and you can sell the technology to the research market first. And it gives you 3 benefits. One, a research customer is very influential because he can influence the physician or biopharma who would then engage with you. So it's credibility and influence first. Second is it helps you optimize your product in your workflow. And third is it buys you time. And so we focused on that market first, and then gradually over time collected data and maturity to focus on diagnostics. And so to support the research market, which is a very, very small market size, we leverage SBIRs to both, like I said, collect credibility on data, but also time. And then with that initial success of revenue and customer advocates, we went to investors and then raised more money, which collectively helped us to focus on the diagnostic market that we are focusing on right now.
Great. Thanks, Sid. And now, Maddie, I think you were the opposite of that. Is that true?
Oh, yes, we were the opposite. We did a Series A, which was like a friends and family raise. Then we did a Series B. And then there was a perfect SBIR that was announced that would augment the initial product, which we applied for and received. And then part of the SBIR, we applied for and were allowed to participate in the SBIR investor initiatives, which gave us access to several investor conferences, one of which was Resi, which we went to, and we picked up an investor that was part of our Series C. So yes, opposite for us.
Great. That's awesome. Yeah, that's a good plug for our Investor Initiatives program. That's also listed as a resource on one of the slides. And at its simplest form, some of our awardees can apply, and that's reviewed by our network of pharma and venture capital folks. They provide written feedback, and some companies are selected and given funds to go pitch to some of the best conferences across the country. And a lot of times, as in Maddie's case, that can often result in some good deals. But yeah, I think it would be valuable to hear your input too as well, and manage on the therapeutic side, into organizing.
Yeah, we took a slightly different tactic here. We had some initial money to launch some research, and we did research in collaboration with Washington State University, and really the whole strategic business plan of the company is to take products basically one at a time off the research bench and into the clinic. And so our really pain point was getting it into the clinic. And for us, a lot of the early radiodiagnostics and radiotherapeutics that are being developed really need some early clinical data in order to support subsequent financing and or licensing deals. And that's not uncommon amongst any of the products really, but for particularly radiodiagnostics and radiotherapeutics, it's very, very helpful to have that clinical data. And so we went to the SBIR phase 2 program and the phase 2B program to get money to leapfrog those forward through clinical trials. And on the basis of our initial clinical trial for our radiodiagnostic, I was able to do a very nice licensing deal with Novartis. And Novartis then acts as our development partner for that diagnostic, and then we take in the funds from that licensing deal, initial milestone payments, and now probably in 2026 it'll be commercialized and we'll have some revenue coming in from that. But we take that and then leapfrog forward the next product, and again use SBIR funds to help us with our clinical trial. And we already have some candidates now for licensing on our radiotherapeutic. So we don't develop a whole portfolio of products at one time with a lot of investor money. We very carefully move each one forward and then do a licensing deal to find the development partner that has the expertise, because we're not going to become a fully integrated pharmaceutical companies per se. So SBIR has been really, really helpful in that model and moving that model forward to get us initially for the pre-IND enabling studies and then for the subsequent clinical studies.
Thanks, Bing. That was great. Manoj, anything to add on that note?
We actually started with, we had some data, some animal data using our product in the early version. We applied to NSF. They had a program on how to optimize, nanotechnology, manufacturing, scale up. We also, when we were still at academia, we used some of the programs they had on innovation to get some funding to be able to get things moving. After NSF, we got some funds from friends and family. That helped us with generating more data to submit a fast track to NCI as well as NIDCR. And that really, we were fortunate, we got both, and we were able to build a small facility, build a lab to generate even more data, so we were less dependent on academia, and we were able to, do things better, faster. When you're, in my opinion, when you're dependent on using a lot of resources from academia, things slow down a lot. And once we are able to build even a small facility, things move much faster, especially in the therapeutics where there's so much testing and things that FDA requires, like CMC. And those are really, really intense, and they require a lot of time and resources. So after that, we raised more funds from investors. And so we've been working with NCI for a while. We have 3 programs that we are working on, and 2 of them are in the clinic, and 1 of them is kind of in the getting into the pre-IND stage. So yeah, so we've done a combination of what I've heard today. And we also are working with a large pharma in order to get, and they paid us some funds to be able to further our research. So it's a combination of different things.
Yeah, that's a great point. And so the SBIR program as a whole, you go through our three different SBIR phases. It's roughly, $7.5 million in funding. So, sizable, portion to get going. And since there's a question on this in the therapeutic space, you can really kind of leverage that for a lot of your pivotal preclinical efficacy studies, IND enabling studies. And actually our largest award, our phase 2B, or Bridge Award, is actually designed to help raise matching funds. It's a requirement for companies to raise matching one-to-one funds from outside of the federal government. So if you really kind of take advantage of the whole SBIR program and start to do some of these fundraising activities, it can really help kind of break through that barrier into the clinic.
Billy, I just wanted to mention on that fund for our phase 2B that we actually used those Novartis funds to match the phase 2B. So you can use a licensing deal as well to help match those funds.
Absolutely. Great point, B. So for folks that are kind of new to this, just getting started, what are some resources that they can kind of employ into developing a commercialization plan?
Maybe I can answer that question. My experience has been maybe a little different. We found out that we had to do a lot of legwork before we wrote our commercialization plan. You have to almost do a storyboard and say, let's say if you had all the funds in the world, what would you do? And, how would you do manufacturing? How would you get your IND? How would you do your GMP and GMP manufacturing, GLP animal studies? There's a lot of stuff that you have to put on your storyboard. And then start talking to people that are in that space. For example, go to a CDMO and describe what you're doing, get a CDA, describe what you're doing, and ask them if they were going to work with you, how much would it cost? What were the things they would do for you? And they itemize, they do the work for you. They itemize what they think you should be doing. And that really helped us. Also, when we were writing commercialization plan, we did say that it's important to the reviewers to know that you did that legwork. You can't just refer to publications. You need to say how much legwork you've done. You've talked to people. We even mentioned, we talked to Dr. such and such regarding this. We have a champion. He's an oncologist or a surgical oncologist. And, he or she said this, and get support letters from them. There is a lot of things that you need to put yourself in the shoes of reviewer and say, how would you convince them that this is not just a side hobby? You're very, very serious about this. So it's more than a full-time job. You call many people, you ask, you get estimates, you get a feel for how much certain things cost, and it's shocking how much more it costs than you think. So if you write a commercialization plan and you put things that the reviewer says, clearly this doesn't make sense. Clearly it's going to cost more than this, let's say, to have your GMP manufacturing for a drug done. So you need to make sure that things make sense. And then you also have to be transparent and kind of talk about, this is what we know, this is what we don't know. So your money is going to help us go after these few things, which opens up even more doors to the next steps and the next steps. So it definitely opens up doors. And I'm also not shy to call our program director in NCI and ask questions. Do you recommend I talk to someone? Or, there are resources available in NCI that have been very helpful.
Absolutely. We always encourage you to reach out to your program director. I remember when we connected earlier, you mentioned that you leveraged some kind of university offerings, I think somewhat related towards SBA and kind of getting some help initially in developing the commercialization plan.
Yeah, we actually, this was at MIT. They had innovation programs competition.
Mhm.
So initially we applied to the SBIR innovation programs, and we were able to secure 2 different times, one on scale up of nanotechnology, the other one was on just, working on something that was very translational. So we were able to secure some funding, which kind of helped us build more data and submit it to NSF. And from NSF, then we were able to raise more funding from friends and family, like Series A. It just kind of snowballed into the next. Once we had more data, we applied for SBIR in NCI. I know it says you don't have to have data. I personally think you do need data because there's so much competition. This is, as you know, it's a very competitive program. So in order to be able to convince the reviewer that you've done a lot of work and this is going to translate, you need to have data.
Thanks, Manaja. Carlos, I think you also leveraged some interesting business plan competitions or MBA students. I think that would be something the audience might want to hear from also.
Yeah, no, I guess we had maybe similar experience. We applied to, we came out of MIT as well, so we used some of the innovation programs and resources at MIT. We were awardees of the Disband program, which is a program where they don't only provide you with resources or funding for do some basic research, but they also pair you with experienced mentors from industry that can help you kind of tune your commercialization plan. We did very successfully leverage business plan competitions to craft our commercialization plan. And we found that, working with MBA students was a great complement for us. We have the founding team, we are first-time entrepreneurs, we are scientific founders. So working with MBA students really help us in the initial stages. And also going through all of these different competitions. We participated in MIT 100K. Yeah, nice. Yeah, that's a classic. We got an award from the RISE Business Plan competition. We won first prize at Mass Challenge. And when you participate in these competitions, you will oftentimes pitch. You will get a lot of investors or mentors in the audience that will make tough questions. That are probably very similar to the questions that reviewers from the SBIR commercialization plan will have. So it's a good thing to work on those questions early so that by the time you submit, you have a well-reviewed plan. So those were some resources we use. I will mention another one that I think was very important for us, which is participation in an I-Corps program. That's actually, I believe NIH offers I-Corps participation to companies once they have received a phase 1. But NSF has the option to apply for it before you apply for SBIR. So that's certainly a tool that people can use. That's a customer discovery program where you can get $50,000 to do customer discovery. Over the course of 3 months, you need to interview at least 100 customers. You use the Steve Blank's methodology for the business model canvas, where you need to identify your customer segments and the value propositions you are offering to them. You start with some basic assumptions of, such and such customers will buy our product because of X and Y reason. And then you get out and try to talk to those people and prove or disprove your hypothesis. And that was a huge help in order to refine our business plan and also make it concrete. Make sure that you add that to your proposal because, providing evidence that you have talked to customers and that you know that your market will go a long way. So that was very important for both our SBIR and also convincing our investors that we had good evidence that the product would be successful commercially.
Thanks, Carlos. That's a great plug for something I also wanted to mention. And you're right, the I-Corps program requires an active phase 1 award. However, we just launched a few months ago, I think. It's called an entrepreneurship boot camp. It's kind of this mini I-Corps program, and it's a little less intensive. And the kind of cool feature of that is an award is actually not required. So if you're not there yet, but you still want to get some of this help, that opportunity is out there, and I'm sure it'll be offered again, next year.
Billy, I wanted to mention too that both Manja and it's been mentioned here the value of getting other people's comments and other like contractors or contract research organizations and their input into what is needed. I'm a strong proponent, as you well know, of being a reviewer on grants, and I think you can really get a lot of insight and input. We've all done grant reviews, scientific grant reviews, but not so many people have really been involved in phase 2 sort of grant reviews and looking at commercialization plans. And I'll tell you, when I started reviewing for the SBIR program probably about 8 years ago, it really opened my eyes. And I've said it before that when you see a good scientific grant cross your desk, you know it. When you see a good commercialization plan with all the essential components that you're looking for across your desk, you know that too. And that really helps you solidify in your own mind some of the strengths that you want to highlight about your own company and about your own program. So I highly recommend that if folks can get involved in the SBIR reviewer program, that would be a really useful resource.
Perfect. Thanks, Big. There's a question on timeline. I think this may depend, but in general, how long does it take to develop a commercialization plan?
I'll say something on this. For us, working on commercialization plan, it's something that we have to do anyways. We need to understand where we are going, how do we answer investors' questions, and how do we answer, FDA's questions. Because FDA also wants to know that you know what you're doing and the product, when it's gets to market, that you can commercialize. So we are always doing legwork. We are always trying to network and ask people, do you know a good person that knows reimbursement models? Do you know a good person do you recommend somebody that understands CMC, GMP manufacturing? We're always asking for recommendations. And, when you talk to someone and you hear the same thing from 3 different people that were recommended, then okay, there's something to this. If I put this in my commercialization plan, I'm not going to embarrass myself and somebody's not going to say, what is she talking about? So, you have to almost like test the waters ongoing. We don't just say, oh, we are about to write SBIR, so let's see what we're going to do. You're kind of all along, you're doing this. The thing that SBIR writing a grant forces us to do is really start collecting all that information like I-Corp does. Put it all together and do gap analysis. What am I missing? When they have these titles in a commercialization plan or research strategy, those titles are telling you, do I have a good handle on my IP? Do I have a good handle on my approach? Does it make sense? Can I scale it up? It kind of, you do a gap analysis, and that can take time, because once you know you're missing something, then you're going to have to go out there and see who can help you. One thing that Carlos mentioned, I forgot to also say, we are in the same boat. We did a lot of competition. It's very time consuming. We would take any money, 10 grand here, 50 grand there, nothing was too small. So in the process, you learn, people ask you a lot of tough questions, and you kind of build a thick skin that I can handle these questions. These are musts, and SBIR is just a way to push you, get out of your comfort zone and do all these things that maybe you wouldn't think you need. So it's almost like a guiding light into real world.
Perfect. Thanks, Manaja. There's questions related towards like technologies that SBIR would consider funding. So I recommend, we're not going to cover those now, but definitely reach out to program director. There's an email inbox at the office level that you can reach out to us and get paired up with the program director and ask those questions. Getting a little close to time, but I think this would be a good one to potentially close on. So there's a question on, who should kind of, take the lead and manage this commercialization plan, and how do you engage different stakeholders for the different sections. So maybe we can kind of just each quickly touch on this a minute or two each, and then wrap things up.
I can give it a shot. I think my experience is that I found that ICOR program or some ICOR focus on customers, but if you think about it, investor is also a type of a customer. And I think if you are able to collect customer and investor feedback through some mechanism, it could be like a private one-on-one meeting, or it could be like a program. But somehow, if you could collect that information, that really catalyzes how you write the commercial grant, because you get a very, very clear idea. So that's what I would strongly recommend, ICOR program and any investor initiative programs, even before you actually write a grant, at phase 2, to have a clear understanding of what's your product, who's your customer, how are you going to get paid, and why would anybody invest in your company? I think if you nail that, then I think the commercial plan is just like putting all the figures together and writing something up. So it's just not, it's pretty easy once you get that. But getting that is pretty hard. It takes a lot of time and effort. But that's the challenge, I think. So I'll stop there.
Thanks, Sid. So in that example, sounds like a hungry CEO going out and making things happen is someone who could have good ownership. I can't remember. So I think, B, you had a pretty good video content slide on this. I'd like to hear your thoughts too.
Yeah, again, looking at it a bit from a reviewer perspective, you see the science side a lot, and a lot of people are tempted to put a lot of the science back into the commercialization plan. And while some of that is good, especially if you start thinking about competitive products, etc., you really have to stand out from a competitive standpoint. This really should be a business-oriented document. It should be very heavily oriented towards how are you going to move this product forward to commercialization. It should be heavily oriented and something we haven't covered is intellectual property. What's the strength around that product? So you have a competitive strength, which is a little bit scientific, but you also have an intellectual property strength, and then you have a financing strength. How are you going to take that product forward to the next step? And of course, the manufacturing strength and in terms of how you're going to make that product, and then the customer base, which we've already covered on here. But I think it really has to be very, very strong from a business perspective. And so I think the final stakeholder in this plan should be the CEO of the company. You can have various people write the plan, but I really do believe that the final responsibility and the final stakeholder for a commercialization plan, like a business plan, should reside with the CEO.
Great, thanks, B. And Maddie, you had probably my favorite line of all the videos, teamwork makes the dream work. So anything to add there?
Yeah, I would agree with all the other panelists. When we were a small business and I was the CEO, I certainly was pulling together all of the information, but I almost was like just this, I don't want to say just the scribe, but I certainly, I had a co-founder who was an expert in our space. We had a scientific advisory board. We had a chief commercial officer who really knew sort of the distribution channels. So it was really a culmination of so many different perspectives and experiences. You need the science, but you need the sales, and you need a holistic perspective on things.
Thanks, Maddie. And how about just closing sentences from Manija and Carlos, and then we'll wrap up.
I just wanted to say, maybe I forgot to say it in my video. This is logistics. I've noticed that if in the first 2 pages, whether it's research strategy or commercialization plan, if we don't give really clear understanding of who we are, why do we think we're going to make a difference in, let's say, oncology market, why we think there's an unmet medical need, if we don't explain it in the first 2 pages, we lose the reviewer. I saw it with my own eyes when I would read my own grant after the reviewer said there is no way we're going to pay you. And I would read it and I'm like, they're right. I confused them. So it's really important to have somebody else, maybe more than one person, read your grant proposal and say, do they understand what you're talking about? If you get too into science and lose them, it's not going to work, because a reviewer is a scientist, but they are not, they don't know your particular science. So I know as a reviewer, NCI reviewer, I have to do a lot of legwork to understand what I'm reviewing. So don't make it too hard.
That's great advice, and I think true for all sections of the application, really.
Yeah, exactly.
Carlos, last words?
Yeah, so I would like to echo what's been said. I also believe that there is the CEO responsibility to own the commercialization plan. Obviously, the commercialization plan covers kind of all the aspects of the company. It's cross-sectional, so you will have to bring in your, chief technology officer, your chief commercialization officer, your chief medical officer, all your consultants on reimbursement, regulatory, etc. But ultimately, it's the CEO's responsibility. I mean, a lot of the sections that the commercialization plan covers are things that you need to know at the tip of your fingers. I mean, if you pitch to investors, they will ask you questions about your IP, your reimbursement, your regulatory, your financial projections, when you are going to break even. You need to have like instant answers to all of those questions. I mean, obviously, you can use the different resources and people in your company to fill in those blanks, but ultimately the CEO needs to master all of those different areas. I would say maybe one last thing also that is very important to, I guess, build your credibility in the proposals, and like back everything that you are saying with either research or facts as much as possible. I mean, I guess that the last thing that you want to find is a reviewer saying, no, they said that the pricing would be this, and again, in my experience, this is completely off the mark, right? So, I mean, I think it's okay to have assumptions or hypotheses. If you do have assumptions or hypotheses, make sure that you point that out, and then make sure that you articulate some kind of plan to fortify or those assumptions or test them. But I mean, there is nothing better like having already tested all your assumptions and having some like multiple sources. If you have like interviews from customers to back that up, mention it. If you get letters of support from people backing what you are saying on the application, that's even better. So I think that's also very important to establish the credibility as you write the plan.
As always, don't forget to check our website, sbir.cancer.gov, for the latest funding opportunities and commercialization resources to support your journey from lab to market. This was Billy Bozza from NCI SBIR. Please join us again for the next installment of NCI SBIR Innovation Lab, and subscribe today wherever you listen. If you have questions about cancer or comments about this podcast, email us at nci.info@nih.gov or call us at 800-422-6237. And please be sure to mention Innovation Lab in your query. We are a production of the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, National Institutes of Health, National Cancer Institute. Thanks for listening.